There's a really interesting story at the very center of the Gospel of Mark. Jesus, up to this point, has been a little bit hush-hush about who he was. When he did reveal that he was the Messiah, he would tell people, don't go and spread this information about. It's a secret. But here, he asks his disciples, he says, "Who do people think that I am?" And his disciples respond with, "Well, some people think you're John the Baptist coming back from the dead. You're Elijah the prophet or a different prophet. You're one of these figures of the Old Testament or just a rabbi." And Jesus responds, "Okay, but who do you think that I am?" At this point, Peter, one of the main figures of this story, stands up and he says these words, the very center of the Gospel of Mark, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus turns to Peter and he responds. He says, "Peter, son of Jonah." This is an interesting word because we find elsewhere that Peter's father's name was not Jonah, but John. So why does Jesus call him Peter, son of Jonah? Why does he say, "Peter, son of Jonah, flesh and blood has not revealed to this, but my Father in heaven has revealed this to you"? Well, I think Jesus is connecting Peter's story with the Old Testament story of Jonah. And the parallels are incredible. Both Peter and Jonah are called by God. Jonah is called by God to preach to non-Jewish peoples or Gentiles. Peter is called to do the very same thing. When Jonah goes to Joppa, he's going to run away from his calling. Peter happens to be in the very same place, Joppa, when he receives his calling. In the form of a sheet which is lowered before him, God gives him a vision to go and preach to the Gentiles. Jonah enters a ship and goes out on the sea, and a storm rises up. And Jonah is thrown out of the boat into the sea, but he's saved from drowning by a big fish, which God sends. Peter, himself a fisherman, finds himself out in a great storm in a boat. And he sees Jesus, and so he steps out of the boat and walks on water and begins to drown, and Jesus rescues him with his hand. Both Jonah and Peter preach mightily to non-Jews. The result of Jonah's preaching, a whole city, the city of Nineveh, repents and turns to God. When Peter has internalized his calling and preached to many people, thousands were baptized in a day, Acts says. But the most important thing that Jesus wants to remind Peter and wants to remind each one of us is that both Jonah and both Peter and both me and you, we are called by God, but we all make mistakes. But like Jonah and like Peter, you and I can get a second chance, a second calling. And when Jesus calls us a second time, he instills us and restores us to that full calling, to that complete calling which we were at before, because we serve a God of second chances.